Welcome in, Loons fans, to another edition of the weekly Matchday preview. Jonathan Harrison here, joined by co-host Manny Lagos, as well as special guest from the Pioneer Press, Andy Greder. Manny, Andy, how you guys doing today?
Good, thanks.
Great.
Good here. It's good to have Andy back on the podcast with us. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back. This is surprised that the invite came after what a train wreck the first one was. That was
a lot of debate.
It was fun. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, a lot of internal debate whether we should do this or not. No, it was very good. Easy choice.
Very controversial.
Yeah.
No, absolutely easy choice. Enjoy having you on the podcast, Andy. Appreciated you helping fill out while I was out the last time. So let's jump right into this.
Hey, John, real quick too. I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know if you can catch a lot of Andy's articles lately. The one on Load, I really enjoyed Andy earlier this week. I thought it was a great write-up, and certainly Load is part of our podcast every week usually because that's how well he's playing. So a very deserved write-up, by the way. So,
thanks, man.
Really good article.
Yeah, absolutely. Enjoy the work you do. Enjoy the work your friends at the Star Tribune do as well, covering Minnesota United, doing some great work lately.
Yeah. You say Star Tribune or Pioneer Press?
Both of them, all of the writers in town. All the writers covering this team in town do great work. So
nice cover. Nice cover.
I said friends. I know you guys are competitors. I know what's going on here. I know where you work.
Although I would say, not to put Andy on the spot, Jonathan, at some point, part of our podcast should be about the evolution of relative soccer in the market and where the writing and the level of writing, and this is a compliment to Andy about in the Twin Cities and the continuation that we need better writers still to continue to tell good stories and what's happening at Allianz Field, 20,000 people. But even the game itself and the growth of MLS, and you got Messi on our agenda today and these things. And I do think we're very lucky to have somebody like Andy that's telling these stories. And I hope we get even more writers in the Twin Cities talking and writing about this sport because it is just becoming so relevant nationally. And I don't want the Twin Cities behind in terms of the level of writing for the storytelling of this sport. And I still think we're a little lagging a little bit, if I'm being honest. And Andy's one of the bright spots, I think, in the Twin Cities for this.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree. Let's jump into our discussion about Major League Soccer. We'll start there, then we'll go into the game at the weekend between Minnesota United and Sporting Kansas City, and then we'll wrap up with our usual discussion and preview of the game this coming weekend, Minnesota United versus Atlanta, a road trip down there, first time in a while. Those two teams have faced off, but plenty of goals, highlight reel goals across the league this week. I'll start with you, Manny, then Andy, you answer next. Your favorite goal from the weekend?
I think for me, I've got to be a little bit of a homer just because Brian White went to Duke, where my son goes to school right now and plays soccer at. And I think I said it before. I think, Duke has got a ton of players, Peter Stroud, several that are now in MLS from Duke. And, this player, I love his pathway where, he was at the Red Bulls, did Red Bulls 2. He was a good forward, but he wasn't quite finding his finishing touch. And their system was a little bit different than the one in Vancouver. He goes to Vancouver, and it just unleashes this kind of battler. It reminds me of Duncan McGuire a little bit, just quality movement, quality chances, assists, goals. The next thing you know, his great goal is the 50th, and I think is now the all-time Whitecaps leader in scoring. So that to me is probably, my favorite goal this weekend and how it was. And it was against his former team. So there just ended up being a ton of drama about it. And I think his finish was so clever and just again, goal scorers find any way to score. And he did that with such an effortless ease. I really like that one.
Yeah, it's hard to go against that one. It was just such a great back heel flick. It almost, if you blinked, you missed it. It was just such a good one at that space to kind of be that lethal in that moment. With that one off the board, probably Hani Mukhtar, in the show notes you have here that you got to put pressure on the player that good. Well, his first shot hit off a defender, knocked him to the ground. That's how good his first shot was. That's why he had so much space for that second attempt. And that was a great hit. I think it was 25 yards out. He's such a great player in the league and obviously a big goal for Nashville.
Yeah, it was that game, they ended up tying that game. That was a big point for San Jose, based on the fact that I think Nashville really hasn't had the best start either. And to try to get points against a team like San Jose and drop points at home, I think the post press conference with Gary Smith was a little bit more tense than I've usually seen it. He's a little bit kind of doesn't show a lot of emotion, and he was on his guys a little bit about the result.
Yeah, for sure. Especially given that San Jose has one win in 10 games. I think you go into that one thinking you're going to get all 3 points.
Yeah.
Yes. Nashville kind of the same boat, just one win in their first 9 games of the season so far. Celebrations. We got to talk about it. We got to talk about Michael Boxall's knee slide, because that was a thing that happened. I mean, he joked about it as well, but the first thing that I thought of when I saw the attempted knee slide was Ethan Finley's attempted knee slide from a couple of years ago. Where does Michael Boxall's goal celebration rank for you guys in the conversation of goal celebrations from this club specifically?
I mean, it certainly wasn't as bad as Ethan. Ethan was kind of, once his knees hit the ground, he popped over the top. Boxy kind of had a couple of feet slide before he went over. Wasn't nearly as bad. I asked Boxy about that, and he's like, apparently my knees had more grip than people's football boots. So he was pretty self-deprecating. You can always rely on Boxall to kind of bring a humorous answer to a question like that, and he didn't disappoint. I was surprised to see Tani drop down and do some push-ups. Apparently that's a Drake reference. That's a little too new of hip hop reference for me to really get. But I mean, whenever you see Robin Lod do the arrow celebration, which we've seen quite a few times this year, I like how kind of customized that is for him. So maybe that's one of the best that I like.
I agree with you. I love the Robin Lod arrow. Boxall for me is just like sneakily. He's kind of like Chuck Morris in that he's so darn strong that you could argue, knee slide versus the grass. Boxall wins that by, just basically can't slide and just, kind of goes into the grass because he's that strong. So, but it was a fun one. It was nice to see such an early goal, and it was really cool to see, Boxall is so good on set pieces, and it comes and goes for him. I think he got a couple last year, but he was in a drought, I think the year before. So it's good for him to get off the mark. I think he can provide 3 to 5 goals this year off set pieces. Just he's that good.
Yeah, that goal was fun to see right off the bat, right off in basically the first, second minute of the game. We'll get to that in a little bit. Other notes from across the league: Miami, as you said, Manny, earlier on, Messi on the show notes here. Miami erased an early deficit, but Messi now bringing his goal contributions to 16 so far in just, their 11th game of the season. That's a lot of goal contribution. I know we expected this from Lionel Messi when he joined the league, but man, he just keeps putting on a show week in and week out.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me because I get cynical about older players sometimes coming to the league where they're going to be hungry to keep fit. Certainly they have this huge scheduled games, and he was injured and he was out. So that's still a navigation that Miami has to realize, that their roster is older than maybe the kind of traditional roster in MLS with the 34 game grind plus our other competitions we're in. And so for him to come back and just look so fit, and just, again, I think it's important that we're talking about the greatest player of all time. Like literally, we're talking about a player that we all would just love to see live. We'd love to see, him do this. And so he's going to a stadium on turf and just has that kind of game and day and takes over the game. It really is almost like dreamlike to see what he's doing and just to kind of have it be involved in MLS now. And so trying to absorb how I appreciate it, but also reality of work for the club, and how do we get ready to compete against sometimes these superstars come to the league, and particularly in this case, just kind of a uniform situation that you really have a player who's must see every weekend and see what he's doing for Miami and what he's doing for the league.
Yeah, I think there's always kind of a hesitation when they move games to NFL stadiums like they did in Kansas City if he's going to be able to play or not, and kind of the expectation of him in those moments, but he's certainly risen to the occasion. I thought it was interesting when they did play in Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes came into the arena and all the cameras were following him, and Busquets was behind and Jordi Alba, and they're like, what's going on? The cameras aren't following us. I don't think they were quite used to not being the stars of the show when they come into an arena.
The other result that kind of surprised me and took me by surprise this week: Austin 2, LA Galaxy 0. I know Austin has been on a little bit of a rise. They've been turning around their early season form. But keeping Galaxy off the score sheet for the first time this season, Galaxy have been on an absolute tear this season. They've really changed around what many people thought of them coming into the season. But then Austin really are just blanking them on the weekend. The first game of the weekend, incredible result from Austin, Manny.
Yeah, it was. I like the word you used, blanking, because I did think there wasn't much in the game for Galaxy. Austin got the 2 goals in 20 minutes, and then the rest of the game was really hard for Galaxy. And then Pansel's done such a great job, and he was somewhat quiet. Mickey Puig was outstanding. I think he obviously had some tough giveaways and didn't have his best game. And then I think they just really missed Joveljic in the end. His movement, his goals now, that front four is clearly like one of the better in the league. And when it's disrupted, it didn't seem like they had an answer to really kind of get back into the game at all. So what credit to Austin. Like I said, to not win in 5 and then win their last 4 or 5 is a pretty impressive turnaround, and a lot of credit to Josh Wolf where they are right now, and they're right up the table with the top of the West.
Yeah, I watched the last half hour of that game, and there wasn't a whole lot in it. There wasn't a lot of scoring chances. There wasn't much to write home about in that one. Yeah, Austin has really had a big turnaround. Josh Wolf was maybe feeling like he was on the hot seat kind of after the first start of the season, and have really turned it around. I think they've exceeded their XG by quite a bit here over this last stretch, but yeah, they've certainly turned around their fortunes.
Another result from the weekend, DC United get a 2-1 win. Christian Benteke finally turning into the striker that they thought they were buying last year, just bagging in goals for them for DC. But Seattle squandering an early 1-0 lead. Yes, they do go down a man after Stephen Fry gets a red card, now been rescinded. Seattle get the win last night in a makeup game, but Seattle squandering a lead to DC United, and Benteke becoming the striker that they all thought they were getting last year when they brought him in, Manny.
Yeah, I think a squander is a good word, because really, given what happened last night in this makeup game where they're up 3-0 and they had to eke out a 3-2 win where it almost looked like they squandered another lead. It's really interesting to see if that's going to galvanize them and push them. And they've got this game this weekend against the Galaxy now, where I think it's one of the games of the season for them, because I think if they lose at home, I think they're playing at home. So if they lose at home and they lose that game, I think, yes, they got a great 3 points in the road, but it means that they're still really struggling to figure out how they're going to get points and go. Whereas if they win, it now really solidifies a great away win at Philly, which we all know is one of the hardest places to win. And it feels like they're kind of back into a rhythm now where they're going to really start to try to climb the table.
Yeah, I mean, Seattle's really been struggling. What do they have? 2 wins with that Philly one last night. They've really kind of been off to a very slow start. Very surprising for one of the best clubs in MLS. I think haven't they had slow starts typically annually.
Almost every year it feels like it. And yeah,
they always find a way to get back in the mix, but it's a pretty big mountain with what do they got? 9 points in 10 games. So it's outside looking in right now.
Yeah, they're already 10 points off the pace of the top of the Western Conference already this season, or 9 points off, but still, that's quite a mountain to climb, as you guys said, even for a team that's kind of accustomed under Brian Schmetzer to these slow starts and digging out of them. That's a big hill to climb for them. The game of the weekend, though, probably goes to LAFC Portland. Just a wild game that ended in with a Denny Bwanga 92nd minute winner at LAFC, as you said, Manny. The game of the weekend the game of the season coming up early on for them against their crosstown rivals this weekend, I believe. But LAFC really continuing to just climb out of the hole that they put themselves in early in. Now 15 points on the season, and thanks to Denny Bwanga's last-minute winner.
Yeah, I would say the other big play, besides that great finish and great composure, there's some cool angles if you want to kind of geek out about the goal. But I thought Diego Chara's second yellow was really the turning point there. It looked to me like that game was headed to 2-2 and a good battle, and 2 teams where Portland really kind of almost felt like they're going to have a good point in the road. And then, Chara got that second yellow, and I think that really turned the game around for LFC to kind of get their home win in 3 points.
Yeah, Bwanga needed every inch of that hit, didn't he, to get it off the post at the right angle to go in like that. That was pretty stunning to see. I was surprised to see so much kind of glow up praise for Phil Neville to start the season, just given what he did in Miami. There was a lot of like, hey, he can turn this Portland team around, and it really hasn't been the case. I think they're winless in 7, so it's been interesting to see kind of kind of the opportunity for a rebirth for Phil Neville and kind of how people kind of took it and ran with it when I don't think the product was there in Miami.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah, it'll be fascinating. I think that Jonathan Rodriguez is a big signing for them, and I think he's been off to somewhat a slow start. I think he had a good goal in that game, but overall, he's still kind of getting his legs going. He's a goal scorer. He's been scored in Liga MX for years, but they put a lot of money into the roster and a lot of players to try to get going. So to your point, I didn't realize it was winless in 7. So yeah, there'll be a lot of pressure on them this weekend as well.
yeah, Portland has really fallen off. I mean, I remember in the early portion of the season, as you were mentioning, Andy, we were talking about what a turnaround this has been for Portland and Phil Neville, and they were up at the top of the Western Conference early on, but now they've just fallen off. 11th place in the Western Conference. They have scored the second most goals in the Western Conference, 20, but they've also let in the second most goals in the Western Conference in 21. So a -1 goal differential there. Still obviously some things need to be fixed and worked out in Portland before we start handing Phil Neville all the flowers. But that sends us right into our discussion. Minnesota United getting a nice win against Sporting Kansas City this weekend. 2-1 win for the Loons, but getting off, let's before we dive into the goals and all the tactics about it, let's get your general thoughts, starting with you, Manny.
I'm sorry, I'm Sporting KC.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one nice thing about the game was just probably our best early start from the get-go. And the early goal and the early energy that we had was outstanding, you know, getting 2 goals in 20 minutes and just really starting on a front foot. I don't think we've quite done that at home this year that way yet. So it was really nice to see that kind of good early energy and great results with goals to get going.
Yeah, and just to, you know, get a set piece goal, a corner kick goal for the second time in 2 games after not getting any on those kinds of types of set pieces in the first 7 games was encouraging to see. And, you know, Tanny again keeps up his hot streak with 4 goals now and to lead the team. Obviously he was kind of on the doorstep there, right place, right time. I think he's doing that more and more, just getting in good spots and making it dangerous for teams. Obviously, you know, that goal was controversial because Peter Vermees after the game brought a tablet to the post-game Zoom conference and had it frozen on that play to show that what he felt like was an offside call. And I asked Eric Ramsey about it, and he's, you know, unlike Adrian Heath, who was willing to say whatever he wanted to about any sort of controversial call, Eric's a little bit more guarded in those moments and said that, you know, it was very, very close and could have gone either way. And sometimes you get on the benefit side of those types of those calls and it evens out as the season goes. But yeah, great for Tanny to get another goal and have 4 through, I think, less than 300 minutes this season is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. I mean, my only, besides the entertaining post game by Peter, it always fascinates because obviously calls, you know, kind of even out and they come and go. But I'm pretty convinced that wasn't offsides, and I geeked out a little bit and looked at it different angles. I think one of the things people forget in soccer is that it doesn't happen a lot because we always see the offside. We're judging like 2 players and seeing if they're even or not. When you judge a soccer ball, with the circumference is different. It's further along than the player, and the ball itself is actually further along than your eye sees. And so there's some good geeking out that some people did where they actually did the measurement of Tani and then the ball circumference of it, and it looks even. And so again, unless there's a clear and obvious ability to change that, I don't think it was offside. And again, when I look back at it a lot, and you look at the ball and Tani, it looks even. And so I feel pretty good about the referees navigating that situation. And I'm a little bit homer, but I really believe that. Like I said, I think I've been on the show now long enough where I would say where I thought, yeah, we might have gotten one and we might not get one later, but I think the referees actually got that call right. And it just made it probably even more entertaining for the kind of post-press kind of Peter. My favorite meme was he pulled out the laptop and it's Naz Reid. I don't know if you guys have seen that yet, but that's my favorite meme of the press conference. Yeah. Is he's showing the iPad of Naz Reid. So
when Twitter, that's great. When people on Twitter immediately, you know, take out the picture in the laptop and put the green screen over it, you know, the memes about it are just going to be excellent, and they did not disappoint on Meme Monday for what Peter Vermees was showing on that laptop in that press conference. I'll be honest, at the time when it happened, when the goal went in, our broadcast booth is kind of right over the Wonderwall, right where the press box is. I was skeptical that it was onside, but then looking back at it, looking at can't remember the name of the Twitter account. I think it's Offside Measurement. If I'm remembering correctly, there's a Twitter account that did the measurement, that drew the line that we see in the English Premier League all the time. And they did the math, and it was like within an inch that Tanny was onside. So after seeing all that, very confident that he was onside, but I can understand Peter Vermees's frustration seeing the TV angle. Obviously that angle is not going to be indicative of whether he's onside, because, you know, angles and visions and everything, it's not really the best when you're not looking at it straight down the line. But I can understand his frustration, but absolutely wonderful goal on that. Let's jump into the tactics a little bit, because that's obviously been the conversation with Eric Ramsey as the head coach. Two-man striker front for the Loons, and he had some thoughts on it after the match, saying that the width wasn't there in the first half. That's why they switched. What were your thoughts when you saw the formation, when you saw it play out in that first half with two strikers up top and Tani Oluwaseyi and Timu Pukimani?
Yeah, I was excited. You know, obviously you're trying to navigate the squad, and you're trying to navigate different players and different formations to see how you can, you know, kind of combine to get results. And so that 3-5-2 with Tani and Pookie is the first time we've done that. Tani's been hot, obviously got hot again and scored, and Pookie came off the bench last week. So there was a little bit of excitement that you have two kind of pure center forwards playing, and seeing how this 3-5-2 would kind of spark us. And I thought the first 25 minutes was outstanding. You know, the ability to go forward. You know, Robin was really in great pockets and getting forward. DJ was getting forward. Joseph was getting forward. So I thought there were some elements of it that, you know, really kind of lended to our great start and our early kind of energy and numbers forward. I think as the game went on, you know, when you get up 2-0, there is a challenge of how much do you press versus like manage the game. And I think we talked about in Charlotte, we did such a good job of managing at 1-0, 2-0, and frankly 3-0 of all that second half. This one, you know, you're trying to find that balance of how much do you go forward in the first half versus when you're up 2-0. And I think Sporting did a good job of kind of just getting back at us, getting some possession, shifting us to a point where we didn't have quite the ball pressure, and they could get some balls in behind. That really led to the second goal. So my view tactically was really probably a little bit disappointed in how we shifted and closed defensively as in the 2-0 lead, in a way that Casey got back in the game. And I think that really then created a moment where I unbelievably enjoyed, from a tactical standpoint, the rest of the game, because I think Eric then really had to manage how we were going to make sure we got the win at 2-1 versus going in the half at 2-0. That might have gone to 3-0 in the second half, but now I have to grind out several different formations that second half, several different lineups, subs, to make sure the rest of the game we were tight defensively. And again, my love of the game sometimes is offense, but sometimes it's just watching a defensive performance. And the second half defensively and the subs and tactical formations, you think about it, it might have not been great on the eye for us to get that third goal and kind of win easily 3-1. But at the same time, defensively, they had a half header chance and kind of a half breakaway chance, and that was it for 45 minutes of the second half. So to me, we had to grind out tactically and defensively in the second half. And Eric, I thought, did a great job responding to what the day presented. And for us to make sure that we didn't give up a lot of chances, and we made sure we walked away with a 2-1 3-point win.
Andy?
I think what's been refreshing in this is just the changes that Eric's been willing to make. Obviously, you know, they came in with a 4-3-3 for a number of games, and then goes to a back line of 5 at Charlotte and sticks with it. And then also throws a variation of, like we talked about, the two strikers up top, and not only just being able to be flexible and try different things and be creative with how he sets up his team, but also being willing to acknowledge when it isn't working and something needs to change. Right. I think we've seen halftime substitutions in, you know, 3 of the last 4 games, something along those lines, where he's willing to kind of make a change at halftime and kind of be able to communicate that change and go out differently in the second half. And we saw that with Temu coming off and Bongi coming on, and Caden Clark coming on as well. So I think it's been interesting to see kind of just the variety that we see on a game-to-game basis. I think over the MLS era of this club, it's been very static in how they've set up, and it's been very routine. And, you know, if there was a halftime change, it was, you know, very eye-popping in that sense. And now it's just become a very almost kind of routine thing to see Eric be willing to change midstream as well.
Yeah, I agree. And that 4-5-1 that he went to for parts of the second half was just, to me, was outstanding. Again, I know it didn't lend to us getting forward in numbers or getting chances, but it just locked down the middle of the field. And without Asani in there, it gets a little bite in the middle of the field versus what was Frag in the first half. But like, it just allowed us to breathe and remind our guys, hey, you got to play good defense. When you have a lead, you got to be really tight and organized and shifting and closing. And it's just a great point, Andy, about where there was so many elements of that game tactically that Eric went to, whether it was the halftime subs or whether it was the formation changes. Really impressive, like I said, to make sure the benefits of getting a 2-goal lead, that we walk off the field 3 points. And again, I thought when we were in that 4-5-1, I didn't really feel like Kansas City had a sniff at goal at all.
Maybe my next question here is one specifically geared towards Manny, since you're a former head coach here. How do you balance the changes in the tactics that we've seen over the past couple weeks with Minnesota United, with wanting to settle in your squad and have them comfortable in what you're playing? Because obviously, if you shift too much, your players can't get used to what they're playing, and it can kind of become a little bit of a mess at times. I'm not saying that's what we've seen, but there's that fine, it seems like there's that fine balance between shifting your tactics week in and week out to suit different situations versus what you're most comfortable in, what you want your guys to be drilled into. How do you manage that balance?
Yeah, I think it's important that you're doing it for the right reasons. And particularly, I was a coach too, and you sometimes have the ego of like, you're this great chess master and you're doing it for that reason. And you get caught, I think, when you do it for that point. But when you're doing it because your principles, and I call them habits, Eric would call them principles, of the players in the field need to come out, particularly like in this case, our defensive shape and closing and recovery and making sure we're not getting beat in behind and things like that. It's incredibly beneficial for the fact that your individual habits really create the systems, and so those moments where the group of 11 collectively have to really be in tight formation, but also then they have to be ready for those principles or habits defensively to really deal with what's going on in the game itself, the scoreline. It's incredibly important. And so I think in Eric's mind, the ability to do that in this game and have guys embrace that, he's still learning the players themselves individually and their habits. So this is all kind of great for him because it's not only about that tactical moment, it's about him putting players in moments to see how they're going to react to the adversity and see where their individual habits are right now. And then I get to see behind the scenes the work he's doing and the tempo of training and the moments where he's trying to instill those principles / habits into each guy. And so I think, again, what the fascinating thing for this game in real time, we got to see Eric really getting to know players, putting them in situations where he expects them to do certain things to deal with the adversity of the way Kansas City was playing. And again, it's not always going to work out. Like you said, you're going to maybe get caught where players are not quite ready for a system change, or it doesn't quite work. But it's really fun to talk about a game like this where I think it was executed perfectly. Again, I think the whole second half, the subs, the formation change disrupted the tempo of Kansas City, getting any type of a rhythm to create attacks, to create chances to get back in the game.
Yeah, I think going back on the principles thing, that's something that in our pre-match conversations that we have for the radio broadcast with Eric, he mentions those principles game in and game out. And so that's kind of where, from a fan standpoint, I feel comfortable seeing all these changes and like seeing them in Andy, with how they're able to switch away from something that isn't working and willing to move on and recognize, hey, this isn't working. Let's insert this player here, this player there, and change things and really find a way to take over in second halves of these games. That's encouraging to see this early on in his campaign as the manager of this club.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas City was dominating Minnesota for a number of years in this rivalry. Peter Vermees had Adrian Heath's number for a long time. I think last year it was 3 straight wins. I think it was -6 goal differential. And that was just a continuation of what had been going on for a number of years. So, I said that Eric was going to be more difficult for Peter to pin down, and that proved true, especially given the changes in formation, the halftime substitutions that we've talked about. So I think that's encouraging for fans to be able to see the fact that he is flexible, that it relies on the principles and formations are kind of the the add-on on top of kind of the baseline principles that he wants to play. I was struck by his tone post game. You know, he said he wasn't as up as I thought he was going to be, just given the fact that they got a home win and were able to do it against a Western Conference team. I thought he would be a little bit more encouraging, a little bit more positive, but he said he didn't want to contradict himself, because when they didn't get results against RSL, or when they got a point against RSL, and when they didn't get a result against Houston, he looked at kind of their style of play and some of the underlying numbers and was more encouraging by that. So he said if he would have done the opposite in this Kansas City match, he would have been contradicting himself. So I think it was encouraging that, you know, his principles are for his kind of post-game comments and understanding, and how he relays how his team plays. It's not just, you know, what the result is dictates how he acts around fans and reporters alike.
Yeah, I think I love that, Andy. I think too, you know, as you are somebody who has probably some of the first access to our players and our head coach after a game. The reality too is just like emotionally, it was a grind for him. I mean, to do those changes and to think about how to kind of navigate the game like that.
Yeah.
You're probably in a little bit more of a fatigue time, even if you win and you get through making good decisions and the team come away with 3 points. You know, you kind of are probably in this phase where emotionally you're a little bit, you know, tired, because it was a hard game for him to navigate tactically. Again, I truly believe if we had just been a little bit better defensively with our shifting and closing, and that game is 2-0 at halftime, he probably goes and wins that game 3-0 and is maybe a little bit not as fatigued by the challenges that he had to deal with throughout the game.
Warmer weather means green grass and plenty of soccer. Starting in May, Minnesota United has a full slate of academy and youth camps throughout the spring and summer months. Come enjoy the game, demonstrate your skills, and take your game to the next level with MNUFC's licensed academy staff. Visit the Camps and Combines page on MNUFC.com for more information. I feel there's more meat on this bone tactically that you may give us insight to, Manny. So here, I'm going to give you the floor here. What other things that we haven't discussed here tactically? Let's geek out a little bit, as you said a couple times on this podcast. Let's geek out here. What other tactical things stuck out to you from this 2-1 win from Minnesota at the weekend?
Well, again, I mean, not to toot Andy, I think Andy did a good job of bringing up the kind of the big fruit. The change at halftime when you have a lead, it is a brave move. You know, typically you like to say, you know what, guys, I've got some adjustments for you. I've got some ideas how I want to play the next 10 to 15 minutes, and then to really start to slow the rhythm down of the game. And so right away to kind of say, no, we're going to get better in the center of the midfield. I want us to win that more. I don't want them to kind of get the ball wide and get over the top. And his ability to kind of, like I said, go into that 4-5-1 so quickly, where it's like, guys, we're shutting this down. And I kind of mentioned that before. So for me, it really was every sub and every kind of moment at second half had a little bit of element of, I've got to slow the tempo of the game down to make sure we're doing the things that we didn't do for that last 15 minutes of the first half. And again, like I said, I think the silver lining is I thought the guys, and he executed that perfectly in the second half.
I think for me,
it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how he manages it going forward, right? Because he talked about taking guys off at halftime, and he's got to be able to massage that over with guys like Pukki and Fraga, veterans that expect to play and expect to play big minutes. And he had to kind of communicate that it was about the team and what was best for the team, not about the individual players that do that. So I think there's going to be man managing that he's going to have to do, especially with that kind of shock of a halftime substitution that I think we're all kind of used to kind of having our heads turn over when maybe it's not as big of a move as we're making it out to be, just given the historical kind of significance we place on it.
I think that's a great point, Andy, particularly given that neither of them were playing that poorly. In fact, they both were having pretty good games. I thought they both were putting good effort in, good minutes. I mean, they were getting around the field. It wasn't like both Fraga and Pukki weren't, having a howler offensively. They were moving the ball. They weren't losing the ball a lot. So to your point, that's a lot of work to get buy-in for what we're doing and why we're doing it as a group, and trying to make those guys individually don't think about themselves versus the group.
Yeah, you mentioned some guys who were playing well there. Those guys certainly were, and that's obvious. That was obviously a big call at the weekend, and it paid off in the 2-1 win. Another guy who's kind of found his form exceptionally well in this new look Minnesota United, Josef Rosales, especially at that wingback role, earning team of the week or team of the match day honors this week. He's really found himself in this wingback role, and it really seems to fit him well. What about it, Manny, plays into the way Josef Rosales plays this game, and how does it fit him the best?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, Josef is one of these players that I don't people realize for such a young player. I think it's goes a little bit underrated about. He's so clever about the game. He really gets the game. He really understands, the game of soccer and what his role is in terms of trying to make it tough for if he's going up against Johnny Russell or something like that, but then also getting forward and holding the ball. And so, on these big switches where his first touch is so important for us to get out of a tough space and get going in another space of the field to attack. His first touch has been outstanding. It's really been fun to watch. And I think my brain goes to he had one 40 or 50-yard ball where he just brought it down on his chest. And that ability to do that so quickly and then just now get our players out, and now we're going to attack in a phase of the field that's important for us to hold the ball for a while against a team where we're probably in a little bit more of a defensive mode, was incredibly important. And so I've been really impressed with his grittiness, his cleverness, but then combine that with he just has a little bit of really understands the game. Like I said, he really understands when to tuck in defensively, when to close, when to be a little bit tough and gritty, physically. So he's not soft. I think that makes it important because there's guys he goes up against are a little bit afraid of him because he's got a little something edge to him, which I like. So he's just done a great job. Again, last year, I think we saw that, this kid's got something because he played 5 different positions. And this year we're kind of saying, you know what? Left back, left wing back. Let's see how those two. And so he's simplified that. He's really got 2 positions now that he's kind of thinking about. He doesn't play left forward, which I think is a really tough ask in this league, given the level of high-powered forwards. That's not his skill set. But his ability to be a two-way player wide right now has been outstanding.
Yeah, I think it brings some of his skill set as being a central midfielder, which I think he kind of originally was, is the fact that as a wingback role, he's getting forward more. I think that's more comfortable for him than just being a left back and more, more defensive responsibilities. I think the blending kind of suits his versatility more.
Yeah, I think the next phase for him too is just a little bit more comfortable driving with the ball like a winger would do, or a wing back or even an outside back. He still sometimes thinks about just pulling back because he's a central midfielder and he's solving problems through passing or kind of splitting lines with a dribble through the middle. So I think that next phase for him is just getting more comfortable. Say, hey, you can run with that ball to the end line and cross it. I mean, you at times can just get excited for 1v1 and a good little step over, get to the line. And I think that's in his game. So I think we're just an exciting phase of seeing Josef getting really comfortable as a former center midfielder, showing skill sets wide. And it happens a lot in soccer where guys are in a position where they're pretty good, but they go to another position and now they really kind of have a little bit of what they used to be, and now it's even better wide or a different position they're in.
It wouldn't be one of our shows if we didn't heap praise on Robin Lod. Another assist this weekend, bringing his total goal contributions, 3 goals, 7 assists for the season. He continues to impress, continues to be, as Kyle Hayward, one of our producers here, says, the front runner for comeback player of the year. And you can't really argue with that. He's really showing his importance to this team and continues to show what the Loons were missing in him last season when he went out injured. But he was excellent once again against Kansas City this weekend.
Andy, I'll let you start
on
that one.
Yeah, I think he's in contention for the national award, but I think more importantly for this team, I think he's been their most valuable player. I think when you look without Emmanuel Reynoso in the lineup, he's been able to pick up a lot of the playmaking and has helped them, earn points by being able to be the guy that can get on the ball and kind of turn and create. I think that's been vital for this team when they've lost the kind of creativity that Reynoso had so much. Yeah, I think he's been great game in and game out. I think he's the MVP because of his consistency too. Every single game you see him on the score sheet.
Yeah, we talked about his goal celebration, one of my favorites too. And I think, he's got such soft feet for a big guy. I mean, I can't tell you how awesome that is to kind of be that big, that strong. People don't realize it. And then he can either bounce off guys because he's so strong because he's got the soft feet, but he also can in space do special things. And certainly even on that second goal, his ability to break the lines of the passing and how hard that pass was to break through and get it over to both Pookie and Joseph who are there. Again, it just loads of quality. He is just having an outstanding start to the year. There's no doubt.
Yeah, I think if you told Loons fans after the first 9 games, you'd have 17 points in 4th place in the season at that point in the season. And you would have told them, by the way, Reynoso is going to play 31 minutes. They would have all probably said, well, Robin Lode's going to have to be otherworldly good. And he's been exactly that. He's picked up exactly where you would have hoped he would have picked up coming off that injury. And I think even a little more. He's been outstanding for this team. And that's been great to see. Another, as we continue to talk about, Tanny Oluwaseyi.
I mean, we have one less game a lot of these teams too, right? I'm just throwing that out.
We're on 9 games. Pretty much everybody else, most of the teams above us are on 10 games. Inter Miami's on 11. So yeah, we have one less game and on 17 points already. So there's the chance that they could hop over the likes of Real Salt Lake and LA Galaxy because they're only 1 point ahead of Minnesota. So yeah, as I was saying, Tanny Oluwaseyi scoring another goal, continuing to just show off that dynamic playmaking from him, just being in the right spot at the right time. And that's something you love to see because it's showing the youth that this club has that didn't really get to shine the past couple of years. Andy?
Yeah, and just, willingness to play the kids, right? I think that's been key, is him coming off the bench right away in the first game that Cam Knowles had. He was kind of a sub in those first couple games and kept subbing on, and then kind of earned a start and has kept his spot by being able to score goals in his last 2 games and have really kind of hold down that spot. I asked Dane St. Clair if his name's come up for the Canadian men's national team, and he said during the last international break, the interim coach did ask about Tanny. So I think that's encouraging to be able to kind of hear that he is part of that conversation. Now, I don't think Copa America is probably in his future. I think that's probably a bit too far. It's too bad that the Canadian under 23 team didn't qualify for the Olympics. That might have been a great spot for him to be able to go and play. Obviously he'd, leave Minnesota if he was doing that, and no one really wants that if you're wearing black and blue, but yeah, just a great start and really encouraging to see, a kid that's really kind of had to climb and had this really unique path to come up in the game, kind of born in Nigeria, moved to Canada when he was 10 and overlooked by TFC and has to go to St. John's and get drafted and kind of go on loan. I think he's had a very kind of hard scrabble type of journey for him. So to see him have the success he's had, I think it's fun to see those kind of underdog stories come and star like they have.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, a mixture of Load and Trap and these older guys these younger guys is so fun to watch. And Tani has just, I think we've talked about it before. He's just embraced whatever role so far this year it is. And he's done it with enthusiasm. He's done it with effectiveness. I love that you brought up Dane St. Clair, by the way, too, because I thought he had another outstanding outing. He didn't have a lot to do, but he did really well. I don't think there was a lot he could do on the goal, but he also came up with a couple key moments that just make sure we need him when he does. And he's really stepped up this year in terms of his level and play and consistency.
Manny, I've got a question for you. Sorry, Jonathan.
Yeah,
I got a question. I'm not trying to play host, but I got a question. Obviously, I think fans are always kind of looking at Dane and wondering about his distribution and feeling like it's lacking. How do you look at kind of that importance for a goalkeeper and kind of that aspect of it? Obviously, shot stopping is number 1 with a bullet, but kind of distribution and playing out of the back and long balls. And how do you look at kind of his game there and the importance of it?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, obviously, the sports and soccer in particular evolve so fast, and expectation of skill sets just explode. And in this position, it's just been kind of like at lightning pace, where the expectation wasn't just stop shotting or even just good on crosses. It's now you almost are like a Franz Beckenbauer sweeper of the 70s and 80s, and your feet need to be that good. And so I think for Dane, he's got strengths and weaknesses, and he's still an age in terms of goalie. He's still in that early phase. I don't think he's like into his prime years. So for me, he's just working on areas that are part of the game now, that are getting better. And one of the things that Dane has that I think a lot of their goalies in this league don't is he's a winner. He expects to make every save. He expects to help the team win every day. He believes in himself because he's that good. He's such a great competitor. So with that, I think we're going to get to see a goalie that's going to continue to evolve and get better and do the things that he does well, really well, and the areas that he doesn't, that he'll get better at. And sometimes that means in games you can't quite do everything. You know your strengths and weaknesses, and you don't want to bring out your weaknesses in a game. You don't want to cause the team to lose points. So I think Dane is evolving into trying to become a more complete goalie, and he's got so many great attributes, but he's got some that he needs to work on, and he is, and so to me, it's just exciting to watch and see where he goes with it.
Yeah, absolutely. We've on the broadcast, Dan and I have said a couple of times where we've noted we haven't had one of those games where Dane St. Clair had to basically stop every shot that came in and just steal a couple points from Minnesota. Haven't had that in a while, but this season haven't needed it really at all because the defense has played so well in front of them. 10 goals allowed this season, second fewest in the Western Conference. That certainly makes Dane's job a lot easier week in and week out. Another guy that deserves some mention this week from the game, Carlos Harvey, bagged a hat trick last week in Portland to help MNUFC 2 get their win, and then gets his MLS debut this week in the 80th minute. What do we think about the continued development of that pipeline from MNUFC 2 up to MNUFC, Manny?
Well, it's exciting for him. Obviously, I think going into a game like this for your first appearance ever for the club and in such an important moment where we needed really good, probably 12 or 14 minutes of good just composure and battling in the midfield and making sure the game stayed tight how it was and didn't become wide open. That's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure to decide how you're going to use the ball, how you're going to get in there and really kind of make an influence. And I think the best thing I can say is that he was really smart about not trying too much and to make sure that he kept it simple and make sure he kept us organized defensively. And then when he had on the ball, he made sure he kept moving the ball. And those extra, 30 seconds to 2 minutes of keeping the ball were massive at the end of the game. And he was really part of kind of setting the tempo of the rest of the team. Say, hey, let's keep the ball moving to make sure we don't allow Kansas City any type of openness to see if they can steal a point from us. Or 2 points from us, but get a point for them.
Closing
Yeah,
go ahead, Andy. Sorry.
I think it's encouraging, like you said, to have a player that was on the second team come up and immediately get rewarded for producing at the development team level. I think he was a player that was brought in at the MLS level, right? I think they spent something around $200,000 to bring him in from Phoenix Rising, so they expected him to be able to contribute in MLS. And if you have success at the lower level, that if you do that there, you can come up and get rewarded. I think it's encouraging for other players in the system to be able to see that if you produce, you can get rewarded.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you love seeing that. You love seeing the rewards and the rewards coming through as quickly as they did for Carlos Harvey. Closing thoughts on the 2-1 win for Minnesota. Andy, I'll start with you.
Closing thoughts. Yeah, I thought it was interesting to hear Tupac in the locker room after the game. I was surprised to see the fact that they were listening to that. I know there were a couple old heads in the building, but I thought that might be a musical taste that kind of eluded them. It sounds like Zarek Valentin might have been the guy behind it. Tani Oluwaseyi, who did a goal celebration for Drake, was not a fan of Tupac, which kind of broke my heart a little bit. It actually had me going back and listening to Tupac over the last couple of days.
I'm switching my closing thoughts to Andy's sentiment, which is the greatest era of hip hop is clearly the 90s. And if these guys are starting to figure that out,
Amen.
that makes me so happy because it is the best era of hip hop and hands down. So I've even got my son convinced of that now, which is good.
Good work. Yeah.
No, I like I said, I really enjoyed, the response at home from us losing last time. And the early start to me was really so important because I don't think we've maybe gotten a complete 90 minutes out of us yet at home, which is exciting, which means there's more work to do. But it certainly also kind of, I think, was a sentiment of like just trying to kind of recalibrate how we go about getting points at home, meaning that it's about getting points at home. It's not always about it can be easy. It's not always going to be about a perfect day where you win 3-1 or 3-0, but like you've got to navigate the adversity of a team that's trying to come in there and get a win or get a tie. And so my view was just I thought we handled the game so well at home, and it was nice to get a lead and keep the lead for the 90, well, not 90 minutes, but keep the lead once we went out.
Yeah, absolutely. So that brings us into, I'm just going to move past the hip hop conversation because I'm massively out of my depth there. So that brings us to our conversation, our match day preview of this the show. Minnesota United, Atlanta United this Saturday. Looking forward to this one because this is a game that in regular season play hasn't been played since May of 2019. Obviously, there was the U.S. Open Cup run, the U.S. Open Cup final played between those two that Atlanta won. There's been a pseudo rivalry between these two teams since they came into the league at the same time. Obviously, took very different paths in their MLS run, but since Atlanta kind of reached the peak of the top, they've kind of steadily been going downhill a little bit. They still bring in some high caliber players, but it hasn't been straight to the top and stayed there for Atlanta, like kind of LAFC. You would argue LAFC has since joining the league, but Atlanta coming off a rather uninspiring draw in Chicago after Chicago kind of just sat back for the 90 minutes. No shots on goal for Chicago in that one, 6-4 Atlanta in that 0-0 draw at the weekend. Just one win in their last 5 games. That was a 3-0 match against Chicago down in Atlanta. So it hasn't been the easiest starts of season for Atlanta. What are our thoughts heading into this one, Manny?
Yeah, I think you brought it up, that co-entry in 2017. I think that's historical. So that's always part of our kind of legacy of the two clubs. And, in terms of just us being in the league at the same time. U.S. Open Cup final always is a big one for me. We haven't played them in a long time since COVID, and just really that tough loss, but it was a great run for us, and congratulations to them, because I think that was a kind of, you said, the pinnacle of, they had a great couple years where they won the MLS Cup, they won the Open Cup. And I just think it's exciting for us the way we're playing to go down there and see how we're going to play against a big crowd in a kind of unique environment. I don't think it's an overwhelming environment, if I'm being honest. I know they get a big crowd and they're loud, but it is usually closed indoor on turf. And I think it's a game that reminds me of Charlotte, in that, like, I think if we're organized and we're ready to kind of compete and deal with adversity, we can have a good result. And part of the reason why I say that is just because I do think you're right. I think Atlanta wants to have their legacy be this great team and believe they are, but you have to put the work in, and you have to kind of, it doesn't matter how much money you spend in this league. I think you've got to also do the work to build a group and a team to be competitive. And they've done a good job, and they've got a great lineup and a great roster. And certainly we'll talk about some individual players, but I also get a sense that sometimes they play a little stressed and a little bit kind of, not quite hungry the way that I would expect them to be with the kind of lineup they have. And I think we can use that to our advantage.
Okay, and you might have froze there. Yeah, I think this one provides an interesting back and forth between these two clubs. Just based off of what we've seen so far this year between them. Atlanta, 9th place in the Eastern Conference, 1.33 points per game so far this season. They started off nicely, but since then, as we said, only one win in their last 5 matches. How much of that is down to Giakoumakis having some injury issues? Obviously missed a couple weeks due to that injury, has returned in the past couple games for them. Checking to see, hasn't scored since that game against the Fire in that 3-0 win. So he's obviously an electric guy that we'll have to talk about. But how much of this is down to their recent struggles, down to not having Giakoumakis week in and week out over the past couple weeks?
I'm going to throw it to Andy. We lost Andy for a few minutes right there, so we were kind of like you were frozen in our Zoom here. So, but I just mentioned kind of our history in Atlanta, Andy, and then you talked about a little individual players. So, just your thoughts before I go into mine a little bit about the individual players.
Oh, I almost lost you there again. I asked Dane about Atlanta yesterday, and he talked about, they have one of the best strikers in the league. They have one of the best 10s in the
Frozen again.
Oh no! Oh no!
All right. I'll throw in that. Yes, Almada, World Cup winner. Yep. Quick, lively. Certainly, I think you got to be smart, because he's one of those guys where physically he doesn't look like a lot, and the next thing he just pops up, and he's got energy to get in the box and get shots off from distance. He's got energy to kind of create assists. So he's one of those guys that we have to manage for sure. And then Giakoumakis is a true forward. He's somebody that every game he's going to be physical. He believes he's going to score, makes good runs, really good finisher. He had one of the better finishes this year, I think, as a forward. So Those two guys certainly offensively are outstanding, and we're going to have to keep an eye on them for sure.
I didn't really know what to expect from Giacomakis when they first brought him in from Celtic a couple of years ago, but man, he's done nothing but live up to the billing. 17 goals last season, and then 5 so far this season. Had the opening week hat trick for them. But he's a guy that the Minnesota defense that has been stout this season will have their hands full with him. And you mentioned Thiago Almada, World Cup winner, an electric kid to watch. Obviously has aspirations of following previous footsteps in Atlanta over to Europe. And as a young kid, an Argentinian number 10, you expect that of him, and he's been everything Atlanta would have wanted when they brought him in a couple years ago. And just like you can't give Hani Mukhtar the amount of time that he was given this weekend, you can't give Almada any time to play on that ball. Otherwise, he's going to create dangerous opportunities for the Atlanta attack.
Yeah, he is. And again, he really is somebody who, they drive the offense through. I think sometimes you need Adam defensively because sometimes he gets out of position. Sometimes he's a little bit lax, but certainly I look at Muamba's a tidy player in that midfielder they've added who adds a lot of quality. I think Brooks Lennon is sneakily, you got to be aware of him. He's somebody that gets up and down that line, and on his day when he's really on, he puts in great service to Giacomakis. So that's really a connection that we have to be aware of. And, we're going against one of the more historic goalies as well in U.S. soccer history in Brad Guzan. So it's a great challenge. Like I said, I think this is a great time for this game because we had a great home win. We just won on the road. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be a level of desperation for them to try to get back up the table in the East. Like you said, I think they're at 3-3-3. So for me, us absorbing that kind of tension they have and using it to our advantage may be key. But we are going to have to deal with some pressure. There's going to be some desperation and intensity and tempo that they're going to bring to this game that we're going to have to be ready for.
They've got the best goals, or they've got the best defensive record in the Eastern Conference, tied with Cincinnati, allowing just 9 goals so far this season. And that's despite losing Miles Robinson this offseason. That's not really an easy task of trying to replace him. But how have they done it defensively that's going to cause Minnesota problems? I mean, Tani Oluwaseyi and Teemu Pukki, along with Robin Lod and the rest of the attackers from Minnesota, they're going to have their hands full this weekend trying to break down that Atlanta back line.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt. Like I said, they sometimes when we get rid of your really good player, particularly an athletic player, you now become more organized as a group as opposed to like, oh, this individual will catch up and clean up our mess. It happens with goalies sometimes where you have a great goalie, but then that makes your back four a little bit lax, thinking that we've got somebody that can really clean it up, and then next thing you know, forwards and goal scorers are great and they're scoring goals. And I think they've done a good job of their back four being really organized, really disciplined in terms of, just managing certain situations. So for me, again, like I said, I think there's still TBD what their identity is. And this in their mind will be a big game to say they're playing against one of the teams at the top of the West. And we've got to show that we're on the rise in the East. So to me, it's a really, really big matchup just from the psychology of where they are as a club. And again, for us, we're trying to establish, value of getting points on the road and playing against a team like Atlanta in the type of environment, which is so unique. When you get these big crowds, it's really not an easy one to manage. So for me, I'm really excited about just how we deal with the game, find goals, but also defend a team that I think is be a little desperate.
Yeah, Atlanta 3-1-1 at home, Minnesota 3-1-0 on the road. So this is a very exciting matchup that I can't wait to see between two clubs that, as we mentioned, pseudo rivalry between the two teams, just based off of when they came into the league and how things played out over those first couple of years. But since then, very different stories for different reasons. And I'm really excited to see how they match up this weekend in Atlanta. It looks like we might have lost.
We've lost Andy. I mean,
Andy.
The show is done. We should just cancel it right now. Now, I'm not trying to talk too much, by the way. I think the reality for the listeners to know that somehow the internet did not allow Andy to stay on to finish this show, Jonathan. So
the internet just didn't want him spouting his hot takes on Minnesota United. So I don't know what happened there. All right, let's jump into our wrap up since Andy's gone and the show's done. Let's wrap up with a look ahead to the schedule. The big one tonight, though, outside of MLS action, does have an MLS team in it. Columbus Crew Monterrey in the Champions Cup semifinal, second leg between these two sides. Columbus got the 2-1 win last week. They know they'll play Pachuca in the Champions Cup final because they won 2-1 last night against Club America. What do we expect tonight? This is a huge one.
It is. It is. Oh my gosh. And how about last night, Pachuca America? I watched that game. It was unbelievable. Credit to Pachuca. They deserved the win. America was flying as well. It was just the hunger and intensity of trying to win this championship is awesome to watch. And the fact they got a team like Columbus is playing so well in the league, I think they're really ready to take on this away game. Huge task though, because Monterrey is stacked at home, great crowd. It's just one of those games that you must watch tonight. There's no doubt about it. It'll be a huge monumental game for Columbus and a task for them to come out with a result, up a goal, and they gave up an away goal. So, there is a challenge here for them in terms of just making sure that they not only keep the lead, but they don't get scored on. But if they get a goal, it's going to be wide open. So it really exciting tonight. And I think they don't want to look ahead, but we get to look ahead. And I think the matchup with Pachuca is a winnable matchup. So there's even more of an excitement to say you get through this game. You probably have the two biggest Mexican clubs out. It really probably starts to get you excited about maybe winning this tournament. So tough for them to maybe not keep their eye on that, but the focus should be on managing this very, very tough away environment tonight.
And you got to give them credit. They've done pretty well managing their early MLS regular season, going along with this run to the final, or hopefully the final of Champions Cup. Not every team who's in this tournament can say that they've done that real well to start off their seasons, is managing that balance between Champions Cup and getting your season off to a good start. They're in 5th place in the Eastern Conference, 3-1-6 on the season, only one loss from those first 10 games. So credit to them, credit to Wilfred Nancy, and I'm excited to see how they play in a very tough environment. Plenty on schedule for MLS this weekend, though. Real Salt Lake Sporting Kansas City at 8:30. That's one of the highlights of the weekend. Vancouver and Austin, considering how those two teams have been playing of late. That's also of interest to me. Which one's interesting to you, Manny?
I think the biggest one for me is the Seattle Galaxy game. I think that game, potentially a bounce back game for the Galaxy, potentially now a recalibration game for Seattle. So based on Seattle getting a great result last night, I think that game has my eyes on it to see where those two teams fall. And obviously these are all games in the West, so all of them are important to me, and I follow them probably more closely to the Eastern Conference games.
That's the same. I mean, when we do the scoreboard updates during the broadcast, it's only the Western Conference scorelines we're caring about, because that's the teams that we're directly competing with to make it to the playoffs. So I'm looking forward to all of it. It's going to be another exciting weekend of soccer across Major League Soccer, and looking forward to tonight's match, Champions Cup action. Manny, good stuff from you. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks. Apologies about the Andy Greder kind of for half this, or more than half, 3/4 of the show. So he was here for a decent amount of it. So yeah,
we'd normally let Andy have the final word, but since he decided to sign off early, we'll just end with catch this week's match on MLS Season Pass this Saturday, 6:30 p.m. kickoff for that, 6 p.m. pre-match show with Dan Terra and myself on the broadcast on 1500 ESPN. Loons fans, we'll talk to you next week.